Victoria Sterling stepped out of the glass doors of the towering office building, her designer heels clicking against the polished marble floor. The afternoon sun hit her face as she adjusted her expensive sunglasses and checked her diamond-studded watch. 3:30 in the afternoon, right on schedule. The meeting with the Japanese investors had gone better than expected. They were ready to put $50 million into her tech company, and Victoria could practically taste the success. She had worked 16 years to get to this point. 16 years of climbing the corporate ladder, making tough decisions and sacrificing everything for her career. Now at 42, she was worth $15 million and owned 3 houses, a yacht, and her pride and joy, a red Ferrari 488 Spider that cost more than most people made in 5 years. Victoria walked toward her car, parked right in front of the building in the VIP spot. The Ferrari gleamed like a ruby under the California sun. She had spent 2 hours at the car wash that morning, making sure every inch was perfect. This car wasn't just transportation to Victoria. It was a symbol. It told the world that she had made it, that she was someone important, someone who mattered. As she got closer to her Ferrari, Victoria's phone buzzed. Another text from her assistant about the evening meeting with the board of directors. She was so focused on typing her response that she almost didn't notice the small figure crouched next to her car. When she looked up, her heart nearly stopped. A young boy was standing right next to her Ferrari. He couldn't have been more than 12 years old, maybe 13 at most. His clothes looked like they had seen better days. Faded jeans with a small hole in the knee, a t-shirt that was too big for his thin frame, and sneakers that had definitely walked many miles. His black hair was a little messy like he had been running, and his brown eyes were wide with wonder as he stared at the car. But what made Victoria's blood run cold was what the boy was doing. His small hand was actually touching her car. Not just touching, he was running his fingers along the smooth hood, tracing the curves of the metal like he was reading Braille. Victoria's mind raced. Was he trying to steal something? Was he planning to scratch her car? Did he have something sharp in his hand? She couldn't see clearly from where she stood, but panic started building in her chest. This car was her baby. She had saved for 3 years to buy it, and she treated it better than most people treated their family members. The boy seemed completely lost in his own world. He walked slowly around the front of the car, his eyes drinking in every detail. He looked at the Ferrari logo, the distinctive headlights, the air vents on the hood. His face showed pure fascination, like he was looking at a piece of art in a museum. But Victoria didn't see wonder. She saw trouble. She quickened her pace, her heels making sharp sounds on the sidewalk. Other people were walking by, but nobody seemed to notice what was happening. A businessman in a suit walked past, talking loudly on his phone. 2 women with shopping bags from expensive stores chatted as they headed toward the parking garage. An elderly man with a small dog didn't even glance in their direction. This made Victoria even angrier. Where were this kid's parents? Why wasn't anyone watching him? How could people just let a child wander around touching other people's property? The boy's name was Miguel, though Victoria didn't know that yet. He was 12 years old and had been sitting on a bench outside the building for the past 2 hours, waiting for his mother to finish work. His mom, Rosa, cleaned offices in the evenings to support their small family. Miguel did his homework on that bench every day after school, and then he waited. He was used to waiting, but today was different. Today, this incredible red car had been parked right in front of him, and Miguel couldn't help but be amazed. He had always loved cars ever since he was little. His uncle owned a small auto repair shop on the other side of town, and Miguel spent every weekend there, learning about engines and transmissions and all the things that made cars work. Miguel had never seen a Ferrari up close before. He knew exactly what it was, a 488 Spider, probably worth more money than his family would see in their entire lifetime. He knew about the V8 engine, the 7-speed transmission, the way the hardtop could fold down in just 14 seconds. He had read about cars like this in magazines at the library, watched videos online whenever he could get access to a computer. Standing next to this Ferrari was like meeting a celebrity. Miguel wasn't trying to hurt anything. He was just trying to understand how something so beautiful could exist in the real world. His fingers traced the smooth paint, feeling the perfect finish that came from hundreds of hours of careful work. He wondered what it would feel like to drive something like this, to have that much power under your control. Miguel leaned down to look at the wheels. They were unlike anything he had ever seen. lightweight alloy with a design that looked like pieces of art. He could see the red brake calipers behind them, and he knew those brakes could stop this car from 60 miles per hour in just over 100 feet. The tires were wide and low profile, designed for gripping the road at high speeds. He stood up and walked around to look at the side of the car. The doors were cut low and he could see into the interior. Red leather seats that looked like they had never been sat in, a steering wheel with buttons and controls that probably cost more than his family's monthly rent, a dashboard with more technology than most people had in their entire homes. Miguel's heart was beating fast with excitement. This was the kind of car he dreamed about working on someday. Maybe even designing. He wanted to be an automotive engineer when he grew up, to create machines that could move like poetry, that could turn gasoline into art. He was so lost in his thoughts that he didn't hear the sharp clicking of high heels getting closer and closer. He didn't notice the shadow falling across the car as Victoria Sterling approached. Her face twisted with anger and her hands clenched into fists. Miguel was still running his hand along the side of the Ferrari, his young mind trying to memorize every detail, when a voice cut through the afternoon air like a knife. The perfect afternoon was about to become something very different. And neither Victoria nor Miguel had any idea how much their lives were about to change. "Hey, what do you think you're doing?" Victoria's voice cut through the busy street noise like a sword. Miguel jumped back from the car, his eyes wide with surprise. He had been so focused on admiring the Ferrari that he hadn't heard her approaching. Now this tall woman in an expensive business suit was standing just a few feet away from him, and she looked absolutely furious. "Get away from my car right now," Victoria shouted, pointing at Miguel like he was some kind of criminal. Her face was red with anger and her hands were shaking. "Don't you dare touch it!" Miguel took a step back, but he didn't run. He looked confused and a little scared, but mostly he just looked sad. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I wasn't trying to hurt anything. I was just looking at it." "Looking at it?" Victoria's voice got even louder. "You were putting your dirty hands all over my Ferrari. Do you have any idea how much this car cost? Do you know how long it took me to save up for this?" People on the sidewalk started to notice the commotion. A woman pushing a baby stroller slowed down and turned to see what was happening. Two men in business suits stopped their conversation and looked over. A teenage girl walking with her friends pulled out her phone, probably thinking about recording whatever was about to happen. Miguel's voice was quiet and polite. "I really wasn't trying to damage anything. I just think it's a beautiful car. I've never seen one up close before." "Oh, sure," Victoria said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "You just happened to be admiring my car, right? And I suppose you just happened to be waiting here for me to leave so you could steal something, or scratch it, or who knows what else." "No, ma'am. I would never do that," Miguel said, his voice getting smaller. "I love cars. I was just excited to see this one because it's so amazing." Victoria wasn't listening. She was looking Miguel up and down, taking in his worn clothes, his messy hair, his old sneakers. In her mind, she was already writing the story. This was obviously some kid from the wrong side of town, who had wandered into this nice neighborhood looking for trouble. These kinds of kids were always causing problems, always trying to take things that didn't belong to them. "Where are your parents?" Victoria demanded. "What are you even doing in this neighborhood? Don't you have somewhere else you're supposed to be?" Miguel's face fell. He glanced toward the office building behind Victoria, then back at her. "My mom is working upstairs. She cleans the offices. I wait for her here every day after school." "Oh, perfect," Victoria said, throwing her hands up in the air. "So you just hang around here every day looking for expensive cars to mess with. Well, let me tell you something, kid. This isn't your playground. These cars belong to people who work hard for their money, and we don't appreciate little troublemakers putting their grubby hands all over our property." By now, a small crowd had gathered. The woman with the baby stroller had stopped completely and was watching with concern. The two businessmen were shaking their heads and making comments to each other about kids these days. An elderly couple who had been walking their small dog was standing nearby, the woman clutching her purse a little tighter. Miguel could feel all these eyes on him and his cheeks burned with embarrassment. These people didn't know him, but they were all looking at him like he had done something terrible. Like he was some kind of bad kid who went around destroying other people's things. "I didn't do anything wrong," Miguel said, and for the first time, his voice cracked a little. "I didn't hurt your car. I was just touching it gently. I know how to be careful with cars. Oh, you know how to be careful with cars? Victoria laughed, but it wasn't a nice laugh. Right, a 12-year-old kid knows about cars. What's next? Are you going to tell me you're a mechanic? Actually, Miguel said quietly, my uncle owns a garage and he teaches me about cars. I know a lot about them. I know this is a Ferrari 488 Spider with a twin-turbo V8 engine and… Stop! Victoria held up her hand. Just stop right there. I don't want to hear your little stories. I want you to stay away from my car and leave me alone. One of the businessmen who had been watching called out, Is everything okay over there? Do you need me to call security? Victoria turned toward him gratefully. Actually, yes. Maybe we should call someone. This kid was all over my car and I don't know what he might have done to it. No, Miguel said, louder than he had spoken before. I didn't do anything bad. I promise. I love cars too much to ever hurt one. But the crowd wasn't buying it. They saw an upset wealthy woman and a poor kid with messy clothes, and their minds were already made up about who was in the right. The elderly woman whispered something to her husband about children with no supervision. The teenage girl was definitely recording now, probably planning to post it online with some caption about kids being out of control. Miguel felt tears starting to form in his eyes, but he blinked them back. He didn't want to cry in front of all these people. He didn't want them to think he was weak on top of everything else they already thought about him. Please, he said to Victoria, his voice barely above a whisper. I wasn't trying to cause trouble. I know you probably think I'm just some bad kid, but I'm not. I get good grades in school. I help my mom with everything. I just really love cars, and yours is the most beautiful one I've ever seen. For just a moment, something flickered across Victoria's face. Maybe it was the way Miguel's voice broke when he said he wasn't a bad kid. Maybe it was the tears he was trying so hard to hold back. But if she felt any sympathy, it disappeared quickly, replaced by her anger and her assumptions. Look, she said, trying to sound calm but still obviously upset. I don't care what kind of grades you get or how much you think you love cars. The bottom line is that you don't touch other people's property without permission. Period. End of story. Miguel nodded sadly. Yes, ma'am. I understand. I'm sorry I upset you. He started to walk away, his shoulders slumped in defeat, but he only made it a few steps before he stopped and turned back around. Ma'am, he said quietly. Victoria was already pulling out her car keys, eager to get away from this embarrassing situation. What now? I think there might be something wrong with your car. Victoria froze. What did you say? I noticed something when I was looking at it. I think you might have a problem. The anger came flooding back into Victoria's face. Oh, perfect. Now you're trying to tell me there's something wrong with my car? What did you do to it? I didn't do anything, Miguel said, looking hurt. I just noticed that… That's it, Victoria said, her voice deadly quiet. I'm calling security right now. But as she reached for her phone, she heard a sound that made her blood turn cold. A strange clicking noise was coming from under the hood of her Ferrari. And when she pressed the button to start the engine, absolutely nothing happened. Victoria stared at her Ferrari in complete disbelief. She pressed the start button again, harder this time, as if pushing it with more force would somehow make the engine come to life. Nothing. The dashboard lights flickered on, but that horrible clicking sound continued, and the powerful V8 engine that usually roared to life remained completely silent. No, Victoria whispered, pressing the button over and over again. Come on, come on. The small crowd that had gathered to watch the argument was now watching with even more interest. This was turning into quite a show. The wealthy woman who had been so angry about her precious car now couldn't even get it to start. Some people in the crowd were trying to hide their smiles, secretly enjoying watching someone so arrogant face a problem. Victoria's mind was racing. She had a board meeting in 45 minutes across town. This wasn't just any meeting. This was the meeting where they would finalize the $50 million deal with the Japanese investors. If she was late, if she missed it, months of work would be ruined. Her reputation would be destroyed. Her company's future depended on this deal. She pulled out her phone with shaking hands and tried to call for a taxi, but the app showed a 30-minute wait time. She tried another app, 25 minutes. Her hands were sweating now and she could feel panic rising in her chest like a tide. Ma'am? Victoria spun around. Miguel was still standing there a few feet away from her car. He looked nervous, like he was afraid she might start yelling at him again, but his face showed genuine concern. "What?" Victoria snapped, her voice sharp with stress. "I was trying to tell you before," Miguel said quietly. "I think I know what's wrong with your car." Victoria laughed, but it came out sounding more like a sob. "Oh, right. Of course you do. A 12-year-old kid is going to fix my $300,000 Ferrari." "I'm not saying I can fix it," Miguel said, taking a small step closer. "But I did notice something when I was looking at it. I think maybe there's a loose connection." "A loose connection?" Victoria was getting more frustrated by the second. "Kid, this car is brand new. It was just serviced last week by certified Ferrari technicians. There's nothing loose on this car." Miguel bit his lip, clearly trying to decide whether he should say more. The crowd was watching both of them now, waiting to see what would happen next. The woman with the baby stroller had pulled out her own phone and was probably calling her husband to tell him about the drama she was witnessing. "Sometimes," Miguel said carefully, "when you drive on bumpy roads or over speed bumps, things can vibrate loose even if they were tight before. It happens to cars in my uncle's shop all the time, even expensive ones." Victoria checked her watch again. 40 minutes until the meeting. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. She tried the car one more time, pushing the start button with desperate hope. The same horrible clicking sound filled the air. "This can't be happening," she said, more to herself than to anyone else. "This cannot be happening today." One of the businessmen who had been watching called out, "Ma'am, do you need me to call a tow truck for you?" "A tow truck?" Victoria's voice went up an octave. "I don't have time for a tow truck. I have the most important meeting of my life in less than an hour." She tried calling her assistant, but it went straight to voicemail. She tried calling the Ferrari dealership, but they said they couldn't send anyone out for at least 2 hours. She even tried calling her personal mechanic, but he was working on another car and couldn't come until later that evening. Miguel was still standing nearby, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. He kept looking at the Ferrari, then at Victoria, then back at the car. Finally, he took a deep breath and spoke up again. "Ma'am, I really think I might be able to help." Victoria whirled around to face him. "Help? You want to help? You're the reason I'm in this mess in the first place. If you hadn't been messing around with my car—" "But I didn't do anything to break it," Miguel said, his voice getting a little stronger. "I just noticed that something looked different under the hood. There's a wire that looks like it's not connected properly." "You can see under the hood?" Victoria asked sarcastically. "From the outside?" "There's a gap near the front grille," Miguel explained. "You can see some of the engine components if you know what to look for. And I saw that one of the battery connections looked loose." Victoria stared at him. Part of her brain was screaming that this was ridiculous, that she couldn't possibly trust a random kid with her expensive car. But another part of her brain, the part that was calculating how much this business deal meant to her future, was starting to listen. The elderly woman in the crowd called out, "Honey, maybe you should just listen to the boy. What's the worst that could happen?" "The worst that could happen?" Victoria said, turning toward the woman. "He could completely destroy my car. This isn't some old junker, this is a Ferrari." But even as she said it, Victoria realized how absurd the situation had become. Her Ferrari was already not working. She was already going to miss her meeting unless something changed in the next few minutes. What exactly did she have to lose? Miguel seemed to sense her internal struggle. "I promise I won't touch anything without asking you first," he said. "I'll just look and tell you what I see. If you don't want me to try to fix it, I won't. But maybe if I can show you what's wrong, you can decide for yourself." Victoria looked around at the crowd of people watching her. Some of them were checking their own watches, probably running late for their own appointments. Others were clearly enjoying the entertainment. The teenage girl was definitely still recording, and Victoria realized this whole embarrassing scene was probably going to end up on social media. She thought about the board meeting, about the investors who were counting on her to be there, about the employees whose jobs depended on this deal going through. She thought about all the years she had worked to get to this point, all the sacrifices she had made. Then she looked at Miguel, really looked at him for the first time. He wasn't smirking or acting like he was trying to cause trouble. He looked genuinely worried about her situation, even after the way she had treated him. His eyes were serious and focused, like he really did know something about cars. "Fine," Victoria said finally, the word coming out like she was spitting out something bitter. "Fine, you can look. But if you touch anything without my permission, I'm calling the police. Miguel's face lit up with relief. Thank you, ma'am. I'll be really careful. He walked over to the front of the Ferrari and crouched down near the grill. The crowd pressed a little closer, everyone curious to see what this young boy thought he could do with such an expensive car. Victoria stood behind him, her arms crossed, watching his every move. She was still angry, still skeptical, but underneath all of that, a tiny voice in her head was whispering something she didn't want to admit. Maybe, just maybe, she was about to be very surprised. Miguel knelt down in front of the Ferrari, his small frame looking even smaller next to the sleek red machine. The crowd had grown larger now, with people stopping their afternoon activities to see what was happening. Victoria stood directly behind him, her arms still crossed, watching his every movement like a hawk watching a mouse. Okay, Miguel said, his voice calm and focused, completely different from the scared, sad tone he'd had just minutes before. I can see the problem from here. He pointed toward a small gap in the front grille where some of the engine components were visible. See that black wire there? The thick one? That's supposed to be connected to the positive terminal on your battery, but it's come loose. Victoria squinted where he was pointing, but honestly she couldn't tell one wire from another. The engine bay of a Ferrari might as well have been the inside of a spaceship to her. How can you possibly see that? She asked. My uncle taught me to always look at the battery connections first when a car won't start, Miguel explained, still studying the engine. He says that's the most common problem, especially in cars that get driven a lot. The vibrations from driving can sometimes shake things loose. One of the businessmen in the crowd laughed. Kid, I hate to break it to you, but this lady probably has the best mechanics in the city working on this car. I doubt they'd miss something as simple as a loose wire. Miguel looked up at the man with serious eyes. Even the best mechanics are human, sir, and sometimes things come loose after the car leaves the shop. My uncle always says that cars are machines and machines have moving parts and moving parts can work themselves loose over time. Victoria checked her watch again. 35 minutes until her meeting. The panic was building in her chest, but she forced herself to stay calm. Okay, so if that's what's wrong, how exactly do you plan to fix it? Do you have tools hidden in your backpack or something? Miguel shook his head. I don't need tools for this. The battery is right there, and if the connection is just loose, I should be able to push it back on with my hands. With your hands? Victoria's voice went up. You want to stick your hands into the engine of my Ferrari? I won't touch anything else, Miguel promised. Just that one connection, and only if you say it's okay. Victoria looked around at the crowd. The woman with the baby stroller was nodding encouragingly. The elderly couple was watching with fascination. Even the teenage girl had stopped recording and was leaning in to see what would happen next. This is insane, Victoria muttered. But what choice did she have? She could wait for a tow truck and definitely miss her meeting. Or she could let this kid try something that might actually work. Fine, she said through gritted teeth. But I'm watching every single thing you do. Miguel nodded and carefully positioned himself in front of the car. He was small enough that he could reach through the gaps in the front grille. But Victoria could see it was going to be tight. He rolled up the sleeves of his too big t-shirt and took a deep breath. Okay, he said, more to himself than to anyone else. Nice and easy. He slipped his thin arm through the grill, moving slowly and carefully. Victoria found herself holding her breath, terrified that he was about to damage something that would cost thousands of dollars to repair. The crowd was completely silent, everyone watching this incredible scene unfold. I can feel it, Miguel said, his voice slightly strained from the awkward position. The wire is definitely loose. It's just barely touching the terminal, but it's not making a good connection. His face scrunched up in concentration as he worked. Victoria could see his arm moving slightly inside the engine bay, but she couldn't see exactly what he was doing. For a moment, she wondered if she had just made the biggest mistake of her life by trusting a random kid with her most prized possession. Almost got it, Miguel said. Just need to… there. He pulled his arm back out of the grill, a satisfied smile on his face. Try starting it now. Victoria stared at him. That's it? You just pushed a wire back into place? That's all it needed, Miguel said, standing up and brushing some dust off his jeans. Sometimes the simplest problems have the simplest solutions. Victoria looked down at her car key, then back at Miguel, then at the crowd of people watching. She felt like she was in some kind of weird dream. This couldn't possibly work. Things like this didn't happen in real life. but she pressed the start button anyway. The Ferrari roared to life immediately. The sound of that perfect V8 engine filled the air. Powerful and smooth and absolutely beautiful. Victoria's mouth fell open in shock. The crowd started clapping and cheering. The woman with the baby stroller called out, "Way to go, kid!" The elderly man was shaking his head in amazement. Victoria just stood there, staring at Miguel in complete disbelief. The engine was purring like a contented cat. All the dashboard lights were normal, and that horrible clicking sound was completely gone. "How?" she started to say, then stopped. "How did you know how to do that?" Miguel's cheeks turned a little red from all the attention. "My uncle owns a garage called Rodriguez Auto Repair. I've been helping him fix cars since I was 7 years old. He teaches me everything. Engines, transmissions, electrical systems. Everything." "But you're just a kid," Victoria said, still trying to process what had just happened. "I'm 12, Miguel said with a slight smile, "but I've been around cars my whole life. My uncle says I have a natural talent for it. He thinks I could be a really good mechanic someday, or maybe even an automotive engineer." Victoria felt something strange happening in her chest, like a heavy weight was slowly lifting. "An automotive engineer? That's my dream," Miguel said, his eyes lighting up. "I want to go to college and study engineering so I can design cars like this one. Maybe even work for Ferrari someday. I know it's probably impossible for someone like me. But my uncle says, if you're good enough at something and you work hard enough, anything is possible." The crowd was starting to break up now that the excitement was over, but Victoria couldn't move. She kept staring at this young boy who had just fixed her Ferrari with nothing but his bare hands and his knowledge. "You saved my meeting," she said quietly. "Do you understand that? I have the most important business meeting of my life in 30 minutes, and you just saved it." Miguel looked confused. "I'm just glad I could help, ma'am. I hate seeing cars that don't work properly." Victoria thought about everything that had happened in the last 20 minutes. She thought about how she had yelled at Miguel, how she had assumed the worst about him, how she had been ready to call security on a kid who was just admiring her car. She thought about how he had tried to tell her about the problem, and how she had accused him of damaging her car. She thought about how patient and polite he had been, even when she was treating him terribly. And now this same kid had just solved her problem with skills and knowledge that she never would have imagined he possessed. Victoria Sterling, successful businesswoman and millionaire, realized she had just learned something that all her years of education and experience had never taught her. Sometimes the most important lessons come from the most unexpected teachers. Victoria stood in the middle of the sidewalk listening to her Ferrari's engine purr perfectly, and felt her entire world shift. The sound that should have made her happy and relieved instead made her feel something she hadn't experienced in years. Shame. Deep, overwhelming shame that seemed to start in her stomach and spread through her whole body. She looked at Miguel. Really looked at him for the first time since this whole thing started. She saw a polite, intelligent 12-year-old boy who had just solved her problem with skills that most adults didn't have. She saw someone who had tried to help her, even after she had been incredibly rude to him. She saw a kid with dreams and talents and knowledge, and she realized how badly she had misjudged him. "Miguel," she said softly, and it was the first time she had used his name, though she didn't even know she knew it. "I owe you an apology." Miguel looked surprised. "You don't owe me anything, ma'am. I'm just glad your car is working now." "No," Victoria said, her voice getting stronger. "I do owe you something. I owe you a huge apology. I was horrible to you. I made assumptions about you that were completely wrong. And I treated you like you were some kind of criminal when all you were doing was admiring my car." The few people who were still watching seemed to sense that something important was happening. They didn't leave, but they gave Victoria and Miguel some space, forming a loose circle around them. "I looked at your clothes and decided you were trouble," Victoria continued, her voice shaking slightly. "I looked at where you were standing and assumed you were up to no good. I didn't bother to actually listen to you or try to understand who you really are. And that's not okay." "That's never okay." Miguel's eyes were wide. He clearly hadn't expected this turn in the conversation. "It's all right, ma'am. People make mistakes sometimes." "No, it's not all right," Victoria said firmly. "What I did was wrong, and I need you to know that. You are obviously an incredibly smart, talented young man, and I should have seen that right away. Instead, I let my own prejudices blind me to who you really are." She took a deep breath and looked around at the crowd, then back at Miguel. "You saved my entire business deal today. Do you understand that? Because of your knowledge and your kindness, I'm going to make it to the most important meeting of my career, and I almost missed it because I was too stubborn and too prejudiced to listen to you when you tried to help me." Just then, the glass doors of the office building opened, and a woman in her 30s stepped out. She was wearing a simple uniform and carrying a small bag, clearly finished with her work for the day. When she saw Miguel standing in the middle of a crowd of people, talking to a woman in an expensive business suit, her face filled with worry. "Miguel?" she called out, hurrying toward them. "Mijo, what's happening? Are you in trouble?" This was Rosa, Miguel's mother. She had been cleaning offices on the 15th floor and had no idea about the drama that had been unfolding outside. All she could see was her son surrounded by adults, and her protective instincts kicked in immediately. "Mom, it's okay," Miguel said quickly, switching to Spanish for a moment to reassure her before turning back to English. "This lady's car broke down and I was able to help her fix it." Rosa looked confused, glancing between Miguel and Victoria. "You helped fix her car?" Victoria stepped forward and Rosa instinctively moved closer to Miguel, clearly ready to protect her son if necessary. Victoria noticed this and realized that Rosa was probably used to having to defend Miguel from people who judged him unfairly. "Ma'am," Victoria said to Rosa, her voice gentle and respectful, "your son just saved my day. My car wouldn't start, and Miguel figured out what was wrong and fixed it. He's incredibly talented and knowledgeable about cars." Rosa's expression softened slightly, but she still looked confused. "I don't understand. Why are all these people here?" Victoria felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. "Because I made a terrible mistake. I saw Miguel near my car and I assumed the worst. I yelled at him and accused him of trying to damage my car. I was completely wrong and I'm deeply sorry." Rosa's eyes flashed with anger and Victoria could see exactly where Miguel had gotten his strength and dignity. "You yelled at my son? For what?" "For nothing," Victoria said honestly. "For absolutely nothing except being in the wrong place at the wrong time, while having the wrong color skin, and wearing clothes that I decided weren't expensive enough. I was wrong about everything and I'm ashamed of how I acted." Rosa studied Victoria's face carefully, probably trying to decide whether this apology was genuine or just something she was saying because people were watching. After a long moment, she seemed to make up her mind. "Miguel is a good boy," Rosa said simply. "He gets straight A's in school. He helps me with everything at home. He volunteers at his uncle's garage every weekend, learning about cars because that's his passion. He has never been in trouble, not even once." "I can see that now," Victoria said. "And I should have seen it from the beginning. Your son is remarkable." Miguel looked embarrassed by all the attention. "Mom, can we just go home now?" "I have homework to do." But Victoria wasn't ready to let them leave yet. Something was happening inside her, something that felt important and life-changing. She thought about Miguel's dream of becoming an automotive engineer, and she thought about all the obstacles he would face along the way. "Miguel," she said suddenly, "you said you want to study automotive engineering in college, right?" "Yes, ma'am," Miguel said. "But it's really expensive, and we're still trying to figure out how to make it work." Victoria pulled out her business card and handed it to Rosa. "My name is Victoria Sterling. I'm the CEO of Sterling Tech Industries. We develop advanced systems for automotive companies, including some of the biggest car manufacturers in the world." Rosa took the card with a puzzled expression. "I want to offer Miguel a part-time job," Victoria continued. "He can work in our automotive division after school and on weekends. He'll learn about the engineering side of cars, not just the mechanical side, and when he's ready for college, my company will pay for his education." The sidewalk went completely silent. Rosa stared at the business card, then at Victoria, then at Miguel, who looked like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. You want to give Miguel a job?" Rosa asked slowly. "I want to give him an opportunity," Victoria said. "The same kind of opportunity that someone gave me when I was young and ambitious and full of dreams. Miguel has incredible potential, and I don't want to see that potential wasted because of financial barriers." Miguel's eyes filled with tears, but this time they were happy tears. "Do you really mean it?" "I absolutely mean it," Victoria said. "But there's one condition." Miguel and Rosa both looked worried. "You have to promise me that you'll never let anyone make you feel small because of where you come from or what you look like," Victoria said. You have to promise me that you'll always be proud of who you are and where you're going." 3 years later, Victoria was sitting in her office when her assistant knocked on the door. "Ms. Sterling, Miguel is here for his internship interview with MIT." Miguel walked into the office, now 15 years old, and much taller than he had been that day on the sidewalk. He was wearing a nice shirt and tie, and he carried himself with quiet confidence. But his eyes still had that same bright intelligence that Victoria remembered. "Are you nervous?" Victoria asked. "A little," Miguel admitted, "but mostly I'm excited. I never imagined I'd have a chance like this." Victoria smiled. "You earned this chance, Miguel. Every bit of it." As Miguel left for his interview, Victoria thought back to that afternoon 3 years ago, when her Ferrari had broken down. It had turned out to be the most important car trouble she'd ever had, because it had taught her the most valuable lesson of her life. You never know where wisdom and talent will come from, and you never know how much you can change someone's life, or how much they can change yours, until you're willing to look past your own assumptions and really see who they are. Miguel got into MIT that day, and Victoria never looked at another person the same way again.